Hello everybody and welcome to another episode of the Outside Insider podcast here on Philly Sports Network with myself, Liam Jenkins. This is the show where we recap absolutely everything Eagles related from the last 7 days and of course look ahead to the future as well, and what an exciting time it is. There's been a lot going down recently, and with the Eagles hosting their rookie minicamp, we're going to be hearing from the Eagles Wire and USA Today writer Turron Davenport to hear about his views on the last days just gone. The Eagles signed Tim Wilson, an undrafted wide receiver who could fill a very big niche on special teams in the return game, so we'll learn all about that, how the likes of Dallas Goedert and Avonte Maddox looked in their rookie debut, so to speak, and what takeaways we can really get at such an early stage of the OTA period. But before we get into that, I did just want to take a couple of moments, firstly to welcome you into the show and say that if you're not subscribed already on iTunes, do hit the link in the description of wherever you're listening to this, because not only do you get this podcast downloaded instantly without you even having to lift a finger, it comes straight down onto your phone, but it does mean that you help support our website and support the podcast as well. So rate it 5 stars, hit that subscribe and download button, and make sure you've got these lovely Britishy dulcet tones in your ear every single week. But on to Eagles related things, and it is certainly an interesting time, because now you presume that all the roster holes are filled, the direction is clear, and things really begin setting out into shuffling around this 90-man roster into training camp and preparing for what's going to be a grueling preseason. There is a lot of uncertainty there. Running back Matt Jones has come in looking to really shake up the running back picture. You've got Josh Adams out of Notre Dame as well. I guess Notre Dame if I want to be all-American. But there's one spot I wanted to talk about because there is a lot of uncertainty around it, and that is the third safety position. Now, I've spoken about this previously, I think on last week's podcast, and what options the Eagles have. One of them, Trey Sullivan. Another one, of course, now Jeremy Reeves, who signed as an undrafted free agent. But there's one player that I don't think the Eagles are taking into account, and they could do. And they may not. They may decide against it, but we've seen it before. And I want to cast your minds back a couple of off-seasons ago. Now, there was a cornerback in 2015 by the name of Jhelum Watkins. Now, he started outside for a little bit, got some great snaps in, and had some memorable games, if I remember that season, against the Washington Redskins, against the Arizona Cardinals, lining up against Larry Fitzgerald and Deshaun Jackson, and did pretty well for himself. Got some passes batted down, was pretty sound in coverage, but the one knock on Watkins was that he couldn't tackle. That was always the one, was that he wasn't a stern tackler, he was quite erratic, he could never wrap up his man, and he allowed big plays because of it. And then there was a slight congestion at the cornerback position, to say the least. The Eagles invested heavily, and of course there was some interesting names as well. The long-forgotten Ja'Cory Shepherd, he was heralded as one of Chip Kelly's true sleeper picks of the draft, joined the likes of Laerdis McKelvin, Nolan Carroll, and a group of other corners, and Ron Brooks to name another, who really wanted to cement that position down with veterans on cheap deals while the Eagles prepared to draft the future. Now, this left quite a niche in that defense. Watkins didn't know where to go, so instead of competing at cornerback where competition was heavy and investment was high, meaning he's fairly low in the rankings, Watkins decided to try his talents at the safety position. Now, doing so, he ended up beating out Blake Countess, a 6th round pick in that draft. And Countess was the only draft pick of that class to not make the roster. Watkins then went on to enjoy a fairly solid season when he was placed into the game. But after that, the 2017 campaign is where Watkins really stood out. So he really kind of made that name for himself and shed all of the previous instability that he couldn't tackle. 17 tackles on the season, 7 of them did come against the Dallas Cowboys, but Watkins played a vital role. Now that role, along with Corey Graham, was allowing Malcolm Jenkins, as I often allude to him, as being the Jim Schwartz homing missile of the defense. He played 42% of his snaps at linebacker, did Malcolm Jenkins, which meant that Rodney McLeod was often left on his own, if not for the services of Corey Graham and Jhelum Watkins. Now, neither of those players are with the team, and the Eagles love moving Jenkins around, so they really need a third safety. Now, there's another cornerback, like Watkins, who arguably fits that mould. Now, he's a little bit taller, at 6'2" instead of 5'11", a little bit rangier, a little bit younger. But that man's name is Rasul Douglas. Now I know what you're thinking, just hold up a minute before we get there. If we're going to look at cornerbacks who could move to safety, there are a few different options. One of them is Avonte Maddox, who's a much smaller 5'10", I believe, defensive back, who hits like a freight train. You've got another one in Jalen Mills, who has had safety experience at LSU, nickel experience with the Eagles, and would probably be better suited to it due to his experience away from the ball. But when you look at the Eagles' cornerback picture, it won't stay like this forever. It will not stay like this forever. At the minute, you've got a former first-round pick in Ronald Darby, you've got a second-round pick who should have been a first-round pick, arguably top 15 pick in Sidney Jones, if not for that injury. And you've got Jalen Mills, who's carved himself into a starter, and doing anything that is stripping him of that role and moving him to safety or moving him into the nickel, whether he agrees with it or not, I would say is wrong. I'm not a fan of that. I'm really not, and I think that Mills has earned that spot outside, or you shuffle him in and you allow Jones and Darby outside, which means either A, Maddox is taking depth spots in the nickel, which is fine, he's a 4th-round pick, it's expected, or you then leave Rasul Douglas, who otherwise would have been on the sideline twiddling his thumbs, to somewhere where he can be more productive. And it's not hard to see why the Eagles would at least consider it when you have someone like Corey Undlin as the defensive back coach. Now, Rasul Douglas, in his rookie season, having had to step in week 2 because of Ronald Darby's injury, did brilliantly. 25 tackles, 2 interceptions, I believe it was 7 passes defensed. Oh, it was 11, I beg your pardon. The guy had a great season. I remember he had a brilliant game against the Carolina Panthers. He should have had an interception in that game. Or a second one. I know he had the pick 6. Or the interception at least. But Rasul Douglas is one of those players where he's a hawk around the ball. And because of his college experience, he didn't really play a lot of press coverage at WVU. So when he gets to the Eagles, Jim Schwartz moves him away from the ball. They start playing it off coverage. And off we go. Rasul Douglas starts thriving. His click and close is great. He's got the range to jump routes, the athleticism to really challenge those 50-50 balls, and the instincts to come down with them. I mean, the standout games were the Bears, as I said, the Panthers, and even in his debut, he had a great pass defense against the Chiefs. So moving him to that back line, where he can challenge receivers at the top of the routes, he's not going to be a reliability. He's not going to cost the team. The big thing with that move is that Douglas in that situation is going to learn how to tackle. Not saying he doesn't already, but the same knock was on Jhelum Watkins. Watkins couldn't tackle, Douglas can't tackle. And you get them back there, and through an off-season of hard coaching, through a traditional competitive training camp, he's got all the skills he needs. Douglas is a ball hawk. He had 8 interceptions and 8 passes defensed in his senior year at college. It would not surprise me if he saw a similar tally should he become a bona fide backline starter. But he's not going to be an outside cornerback, at least in a starting role, for quite some time. Now, you're looking at least 1 year, depending what they do with Ronald Darby, depending what they do with Jalen Mills, and that's a year lost if he's just sat on the sidelines, or even worse, listed as a healthy scratch. Because if they keep him at corner, you've got Avonte Maddox there. So moving him to safety, where his main competition would be Trey Sullivan, an undrafted free agent Jeremy Reeves, let him play. Let that ball hawk play, because you've got McLeod who delivers the WWE style choke slams. You've got that area covered. Have him at strong safety. Have him as a guy lined up over tight ends, lined up over wide receivers, who can pick them up, dissect the ball, snuff out those dirty screen passes, and get involved. Who can drop down inside the box. I think Douglas would fit that role very nicely. I think he's got the athleticism to do so. And it wouldn't surprise me to see him really make an impact if he made the jump. Now, whether he will or not will depend on his confidence and the confidence of the coaching staff. But you've got to see the potential. And I think Douglas has it. Now, before we get on to our second topic, again, I did just want to say, if you're not subscribed already, iTunes in the link below. Hit subscribe, mash that rate button, give us 5 stars if you enjoy this show. We've got some big things planned this year, especially, without giving too much away, a potential live show in London. But, I mean, you know, that's under wraps for now. We've got to be a little bit hush-hush. But it's going to be a fun off-season, and I cannot wait for the season to start. With that in mind, it's going to be a competitive off-season, right? It's going to be fun. It's going to be feisty. Peterson wants that iron sharpens iron, brings the best out of everybody. That's what it is all about. But I mean, surely, as a team, that stays on the field, right? I mean, you just go to assume that that is born and it dies on the field. You may get the odd square up. I mean, Benny Logan was a menace for it, because there were plenty of players trying to square up to him and assert their authority. We've seen it on the offensive line quite a lot with Jason Kelce throwing his helmet at a bin, if I remember, or punching a bin. But it stays, within the confines of the building. Rarely do we see this team now in any kind of controversial light. However, I mean, I'm not sure if any of you have noticed this, but there are two players in particular who they just don't seem to get along. And as opposed to accepting their differences and their views and their angles and letting it simmer and letting it slide, they decide to take to a lovely platform known as Twitter, right? To settle these differences, to air out their grievances, and verbally slam each other. And it started off, you thought, it's quite jokey, it's quite fun, it was Fortnite versus PUBG, it was LeBron versus Kobe. And then it just got personal and ridiculous and embarrassing. And considering the stature of these players, it's just not right. And I would be very, very surprised if there is not a stern talking to from either the Eagles PR staff or Doug Peterson, because it's not acceptable. In case you've missed it, the two players I'm referring to are Bryce Treggs and Donnell Pumphrey. Now, they are not two mainstays on the roster, but they've been on this team long enough. Treggs has obviously bounced on and off, and Pumphrey has had a year. They're aware. They know what they're doing, right? But to get to a point where you're quote tweeting each other, saying, you're comparing basketball to slavery, calling each other idiots, saying they know nothing, being very sarcastic with each other, and saying who can and can't say opinions. It's just getting bad. And it's like they're trying to get brownie points off each other. And the bottom of the line is, these aren't guys vying for big roster spots. Treggs, if lucky, will be a depth guy. Pumphrey, if lucky, will be a practice squad / depth guy. It blows my mind that in a situation where you should be doing anything you can to elevate the players around you, to sustain a winning culture, they're arguing over Twitter. This isn't best mates falling out. This isn't some retail environment. This is professional athletes with a reputation to maintain. It's just embarrassing is the only way to put it. And I don't know what steps it's got to take to start, but this has been brewing for weeks. And as we say, it started off as almost banterous exchanges, and then it gets to a point where, I mean, if only like 10 or 11 people actually see it enough to notice, it says a lot. It's petty, it's immature, they're grown men. I mean, we all have Twitter disputes and arguments, and we get into this, and athletes aren't immune from that, but when it's your own teammates, it doesn't present a good image, and some of that tension is bound to bleed over into the gym, into the locker room. And let's just say, I mean, it's lucky they're not on opposing sides of the field, because someone's going to deliver a nasty special teams hit otherwise. But, I mean, it's sad we've got to talk about this on a podcast, but no one else will, because it's not really relevant. But you just don't see it from this team. And Doug Peterson has done such a great job of establishing this culture where there's just no shit, to put it bluntly. He doesn't tolerate anything. Nothing goes by him. The Nigel Bradham umbrella incidents, if I don't get tongue twisted, sailed under the waters, it's done, it's sorted, it's fixed, it's over. The Aguilar strip club situation, sorted, fixed, resolved, over. They had an entire off-season without a single tremor in that locker room. No off-season controversies, nothing going wrong, no holdouts, no legal action. And now we've got this going on. We've got Jay Ajayi apparently tearing up a house and being fined $20,000. We've got Michael Bennett, who's been arrested for potentially assaulting a paraplegic worker at Super Bowl 51. And you hate to see it, and I don't know whether it's just the height of the spotlight or what, but something has got to change quite quickly, because all it takes is a few key cogs, and then all those limits, you think, well, I've won the Super Bowl, it's, you take the foot off the gas pedal a bit. And this is where true coaches are tested, and this is why Bill Belichick is one of the greatest, if not the greatest, to ever do it, because there is no off-season, there is no off-day, there is no stopping. That culture goes on and on and on, and you see Tom Brady being blasted after wins, blasted after losses, it doesn't matter. That culture keeps rolling, and the Eagles have to do that. It's keeping those players in check, it's stopping things from getting out of hand, and it's keeping everything very much neatly tied down. We didn't even mention the Darryl Worley arrest in possession of gun and marijuana, or whatever it was, but he's now cut from the team, ended up in Oakland, I believe. You just don't want to see this culture slowly slip away and the players slowly lose accountability. And unfortunately, that, as petty as it sounds, can be interpreted that way. But we are going to leave it there, because it's a special time in the show where we're going to welcome on Turron Davenport of the Eagles Wire USA Today. Now, as we mentioned earlier, rookie minicamp has been and gone. We had 23 tryouts, 15 undrafted free agents, and of course the 5 rookies who were drafted by the Eagles in last month's draft. The question is, how did they all look? Who were the stars? Who was under the radar? And what can we expect heading into training camp is very much a prelude. It's time to hear from one of the best writers in the game.
We just move over here. Yep.
Okay, so Turron Davenport from the Eagles Wire USA Today. It's been a while since we've had you on the show, Turron, but it's fantastic to have you back. How was your weekend?
Oh, weekend was good. Got to go down and see some mini camp. Little background noise now. I'm in the train station, so I apologize. But yeah, the weekend was good. How was yours?
That's okay, the grind never stops, right? So I guess the one thing with minicamp is obviously there's only so much we can take away from such an early stage, without the pads being on and there being a limited time frame. But were there any big standouts to you during that time?
Yeah, I think it was important for some of the guys to come out and make an instant impression. Avonte Maddox really stood out to me, just how quickly he was able to move through the drills, the speed that he showed, as far as weaving through bag drills and those type of things. I mean, the quickness is definitely there with him, so he's going to be somebody to really watch. So he stood out. I also had a good conversation with Jeremy Reed. I think that's his love for the game and the passion that really came out in talking to him in the locker room. As it turns out, the guy had a back injury in college, high school rather. He broke his back. He was supposed to be out for a year. He healed in 6 weeks and he came back. So it's a great story with him, and I think just his ability to play safety and corner, just be that mesh of the position is key for them. And he actually ran a lot of plays, the scheme-wise. It was very similar to what the Eagles do at South Alabama. So he's definitely got the comfort level. He's a very confident player. So that stood out to me. Dallas Goedert, obviously, just the way he was able to get in and out of his breaks. He caught the ball very smoothly. So he's someone else. Jordan Mailata, he's a guy, it's going to be interesting watching him because he hasn't played football before, and it's definitely an uphill battle. Granted, the physical part of it is definitely there, but just being able to be that technician, that's something that is going to be difficult for him. So that kind of stood out, just watching him just kind of struggle a little bit. Then once he got it, he was able to move laterally pretty well. But Eugene Chung, Jeff Stoutland, they were on him very, very hard. And he's going to get coached very hard, so it's going to be a mental test for him. So we'll see how that works.
Absolutely. I think he's definitely been one of the big names. But I think even technique's going to be hard enough. But when you factor in audibles and line calls, there's such a steep learning curve that I guess not a lot of people take into mind on the offensive line.
Right. I mean, it really comes down to the stereotype of offensive linemen just being big, brute dummies. But that's not the case. In a lot of instances, the offensive linemen are some of the smartest guys on the team. You look at a Jason Kelsey, who I tell you what, man, sitting down and technique and X and O's and just breaking down plays with him is more fun than it is with anybody on the team. I love doing that with him. and the chances that I get to do during the season. So when you look at offensive line, there's a lot more technique to it. There's a lot more to know because things change on the fly, blocking assignments, how things are going to work as far as audible and things like that. So you have to be able to adapt. And I think that's going to be a tough thing for the Aussie to come in and be able to do right away. He's really a developmental guy. This is a project. But, again, 6'8", 346 is definitely attractive. They just have to harness it and get it to be able to move in the right direction at the right time.
Absolutely. Now, of course, the guys I'll be blocking for, there's a lot of running backs now trying to compete for their spot on the roster, and there's a whole reshuffle going on there. One of the big names a lot of people were looking out for was obviously Notre Dame's Josh Adams. Did he do anything to kind of stand out, or were there maybe a few other guys and the undrafted guys coming to try and make an impact there?
Well, to be honest with you, we didn't really get to see Josh Adams in action because most of what we saw, because we only saw up through the individual portion of practice. So we didn't actually see them on install and those type of things. And that was apparently when he started to take part in practice for whatever amount that he did. And he said that he's limited. He had the stress fracture in the foot. He told me it's a minor injury. It's not something that he's overly concerned about. But for the guys that are listening that kind of go back a little bit further with football, you want to get a picture of how he plays. I think a guy like Chris Warren used to play for the Seattle Seahawks. This was back when they had Dave Craig as their quarterback. So we're going back pretty far, the late 80s, early 90s. But he's a guy that is very much like him as far as an upright running style. And just, they like to get into the alley. To get to the alley, they have pretty good speed, to get their shoulders squared away and they could take off and give you a long run. But I didn't get to see him as far as practice in the league yet. And that's something that we're looking forward to seeing once we, go back there in minicamp.
Yeah, one of the big things I was kind of hoping to get some reads on and hear from other guys as well was Gunter Brewer. Now, as someone that has coached Randy Moss and has coached some of the biggest wide receivers in football, obviously for Eagles fans, Matt Collins, he brings a very unique style to the table. He's already fitting in with the guys on social media and doing shock dances and stuff. What did you notice about his style of coaching, maybe in comparison to someone like Mike Groh just 1 year ago?
Yeah. Gunter Brewer, I tell you, a couple other guys, Justin Blackman and Des Bryant. Those are some other guys he worked with. And the thing I like with him is just the demand that he has for technique. He was not going to settle for these guys not breaking at the right angle, not getting their hands in the right position and making the catch. He's very vocal. It's very clear that he commands the respect of these players. And I watched Mike Groh from a distance just kind of peek over there and monitor how things were going. Because, wide receiver is his baby. That's a position he's worked with frequently in the league. So he definitely watched. And there were a lot of similarities as far as the drills they did, working on coming out of the breaks, getting your head around, getting your hands in position, and making the catch and tucking it and turning upfield. They really focused on that a lot. Used a lot of poles and flags and some bags and things like that. So I like that. It is very similar to Mike Groh. This is part of the third part of it, being on top of the guys and demanding excellence. That was just one practice we saw, but I was impressed with Coach Brewer, and I could see why he had such a long-standing history of coaching the wide receiver position, and it's very clear he knows what he's doing. So I think the guys will be in good shape.
That's big to hear. Now, I know you're going to have to get a train shortly, so I won't keep you too much longer. But the one last thing I wanted to ask you was there's been a lot of noise about the undrafted quarterbacks and who's going to take that almost Matt McGloin type role going into training camp. Who of the undrafted guys really stood out to you during that period?
Yeah, I really like Kenny Hill. I actually wrote about him, and he's a guy that even going back to Texas A&M playing for Coach Sumlin, I always liked him. His first game he had, 511 yards passing. So the kid has plenty of ability. I like just in talking to him, the mindset that he has. He has an appreciation for this Eagles offense. And he actually told me that, one of the things that stood out to him was the progression that Carson Wentz made from year one to year two. And he also, offense, how it's tight end friendly. as a quarterback friendly. So he's a guy that stood out to me because of his knowledge of the game. Like I said, we didn't really get to see too much of, the guys actually practicing. But Kenny Hill is someone that I came in wanting to see, and I was definitely pleased in talking to him because, like I said, he had knowledge of the game, of course, but he also had knowledge of the Eagles' offense. And he said that he loved the offense, and that was why he wanted to come here, because he wanted to work with Coach Peterson. I think that's a testament to what the Eagles have established here, in addition to Wentz's play, how I stand, and then Foles once he got that stretch on the floor. So it definitely is something that has stood out to people, and it stood out to Kenny Hill.
Absolutely. Turron Davenport of the Eagles Wire USA Today. Don't forget, he's also had a book out. He's been doing signings like a true A-list celebrity now over at Barnes & Noble. And I believe you've got another one on the way.
Yeah, there's another project on the way. It's more of a team type of project. A lot of focus on Doug Peterson, but I picked out 8 different stories on this team, just as far as guys who opened their eyes, not just underdogs, but just who went through adversity and came out on top. So definitely look for that. That should be out right around the time training camp concludes. So keep an eye out for that.
Absolutely. And if you want to follow Turron on Twitter as well, it's at @TDavenport_NFL. Turron, thank you so much for coming in again.
No problem. Thanks for having me.
So that was Turron Davenport again of the Eagles Wire USA Today. Easily one of my favourite beat writers out there, and just someone that you can look up to from both his work ethic and the quality of work that he puts out as well. So if you're not following Turron already, do head over to him on Twitter, as I said, at @TDavenport_NFL. Give him a follow, let him know what you think about the show, and obviously some of the most brilliant work that he's done, especially over the course of this weekend for rookie minicamp as well. So we've only got a few minutes left. Unfortunately, it's a slightly shorter episode due to the fact that we're still in the off-season. This is the podcasting equivalent of twiddling thumbs. We don't want to be just talking about nothing. We need to be kind of on top of everything. And I just personally cannot wait for training camp to get underway, because I know we've got OTAs coming up, but OTAs are going to be one of those periods where a lot of it's still going to be voluntary, and some of those guys who may not be coming in straight away are going to need to then make up the ground in training camp. We saw it last year with the quarterback position, where Nick Foles missed a lot of time due to the birth of his child and the elbow soreness. That's going to be amplified this year with Carson Wentz, which is why I kind of discussed quarterbacks with Turron just then, and Kenny Hill is understandably one of the names to watch. But as we do move forward with this offseason, and I alluded to it earlier in the show, this is more just going to be for the Eagles shuffling about that 90-man roster. This is a Super Bowl winning team. They don't need to make drastic changes. But when you look at a position like running back, where off the top of your head, just think of the Eagles running back in rotation. It's going to be Jay Ajayi and Corey Clemente in main 2. Third, then, is going to be presumably Darren Sproles as a flex returner, someone that can come in as a receiver and kind of fill in that niche. After that, you're then stuck between, well, is it Smallwood? Is it Pumphrey? Is it Matt Jones to replace the apparent void left by LeGarrette Blount? Or is it going to be someone else? Is it going to be one of the undrafted free agents? And it's something like that which presents itself to one of the biggest training camp battles. We mentioned the secondary spot earlier on, and in my opinion, this could be one of the biggest training camps or the biggest OTAs or off-season periods in Eagles history. Because they've never defended a championship before. They've never been able to sustain that success, to sustain that culture. And it almost feeds directly into what we're seeing there with Treggs and Pumphrey and the arrests and the off-the-field controversies that we've seen this year. There is a sudden change now. And guys have to be ready for this. This is going to be a fast, physical, furious off-season. We're going to see a lot of competition. As we mentioned earlier, someone like Gunter Brewer, we've got a new quarterback coach. We've got a new offensive coordinator. Things are shuffling round. And the core has to remain the same. With someone like Timmy Jernigan, who's going to be out for an extended period, where Michael Bennett may not be able to come back for training camp. They need to find sustenance. And it's going to be on the undrafted guys, the lower round picks, the depth guys, to step up to the plate. Are we going to see Destiny Vial come out swinging? And this is what OTAs are going to lend us to. Rookie minicamp is a nice prelude, but OTAs are rapidly approaching. They're just a couple of weeks away now. And all of a sudden, this goes from off-season and draft and preparation and filling holes to what have we got? Is it enough? And how do we fill out this roster? And there are going to be some big changes. Again, OTAs, what can we expect? There will possibly be no Alshon Jeffrey due to the shoulder surgery. There will be no Timmy Jernigan. There will be no Carson Wentz. The team need to work out the third safety. The team need to work out the running back and potentially the left guard position. That's a lot to work out between May and August. And for that reason, with a title defense on the line, Doug Peterson is going to be tested more than he ever has. This team are going to be tested more than they ever have. And we can't wait for it. It is going to be an off-season to remember where I think we see players differently. I think we're going to see a few surprises. This really does come down to who wants it more. Who's going to stand out and go above and beyond the man next to them to prove themselves worthy of a roster spot. Guys like Shelton Gibson will be licking their lips at this sort of opportunity, and they really have to make it count. Will they be able to? We're going to find out in due course, but that does do it for today's half an hour show of the Outside Insider. Again, thank you so much for tuning in, guys. It has been a real pleasure bringing you this show. It's currently 1 a.m, or 1:45 I should say, in the UK at the time of recording, but I love doing this for you. I hope you're finding some fun with this show. We've got some big things coming towards the bottom end of the off-season and some special guests as well. So do hit that subscribe button on iTunes. Hit the 5 stars to rate it if you're enjoying it. And don't forget to tweet me at LiamJenkins21 at PhiladelphiaSN. And we'll see you for another episode of the Outside Insider very shortly.